Good morning, everybody, and welcome. When I saw the time that I was due to speak, I thought, oh my gosh, it brought back some really bad memories. But fortunately, you've completely dispelled them all. There are more of you in the audience than there are of us on the stage. And I'd like to thank the LGA in particular for allowing me to have this wonderful role as chair of this commission on culture and local authorities. It's really, really important at this particular moment in time. But we're going to kick off with a very short film, which will give you a flavour of some of the evidence that we've been taking, and I'll explain a bit more about that later on. But this film is based in Luton, as you'll see, which is very well known for its hat industry. I don't know if there's anybody here from that area, but if you are, you would know that hats and Luton go together like love and marriage or whatever. So yes, as I say, a very short film which we've commissioned to explain and to discuss and act as a prompt for people to think about some of the issues that we're going to be considering. So if we could start the film, please. Thank you.
Culture, I think, has proved to be vital over the last few years. It's something that you can't take away, you can't put on lockdown. It's always going to be there. And whether culture means for you community, whether culture means something your children do at the weekends, or whether culture is something you sit at home and work on in your bedroom, there's a place for it in the community and in the economy.
The Culture Trust operate from 4 buildings here that used to be hat factories. And they now form a cluster of creative industry, creative workspace, animation space, galleries, cafes. And the 4 buildings connect through a real vibrant programme of cultural activities year-round.
So arts and culture is a big part of our Luton 2040 vision in our town, where we're aiming to have a thriving town centre economy, but also a thriving arts and culture and heritage ecology across Luton, of which the Culture Trust is a big part of that through the Hat District.
To be perfectly honest, we couldn't have found a better landlord, because what we have here is a collaboration between Luton Culture Trust and ourselves, and it's just been a very helpful relationship to have a supportive culture-focused organisation wanting us to be part of the arts scene in this area. It's been fantastic. We've helped train one particular member of our staff to learn skills that previously he never had.
Culture is embedded in Luton. It's talked about in various different ways, but it now sits as part of several different strategies. It aligns across people's business priorities, whether it's a vegan cafe down the road, it's a jazz club behind me, or the Hat Factory Theatre. We all know that culture is key to driving the social interactions between people here, and that's going to drive the economy. Whether it's the nighttime economy, it might be people coming out in the day and shopping in the mall. It's important that the culture is there and bring them to the space.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't need to remind everybody that we've been through a lot in the past couple of years, and we're still going through some really difficult times. But in some senses, it feels like that's always the case. And certainly in my very long life, I do get a sense of déjà vu every now and then, sometimes pleasant and sometimes not so good. But I do think that it's a very good moment, actually, to be talking about the arts in spite of everything that's going on. And I'm not here to try and claim that arts and culture, and if you adopt these kinds of principles and policies and actions and so on, everything will be hunky-dory and we'll all be fine. But what we really want to do from the Commission is to ensure that people understand the extent to which culture, arts, creative economy, creative sector can make a huge contribution towards recovery. And that's really what I want to talk about in the few minutes that I have today. I did want to quickly start, though, by saying, because I was asked to say a little bit about my personal life, as it were, and my sort of interaction with councils, which for various reasons have been quite extensive. For one thing, I was actually brought up in the care system. So to me, my parent was the London Borough of Islington, and that was the case until I was 18. And one of the things that is a feature of my childhood when I look back that is absolutely, totally influential on me was books. So I would read everything from Agatha Christie to James Baldwin, sometimes quite inappropriate material, but I was reading and reading. But the only reason I was able to do that was because of local libraries. So to me, that whole thing about the invisible contribution of local authorities is really, really important. I say invisible, by that I mean that a lot of people don't really recognise the extent to which local authorities have such an impact on our lives, not just in terms of very obvious services. So after working for, I have to say, about half a century in the cultural and creative sector, I've seen lots of things come and go, lots of ideas come and go, lots of reasons to be really positive, and then some issues that aren't so easy to deal with. But on the whole, I would say my conviction that the role that arts and culture and creative industries, that big bundle of terms, the role that they can play in enhancing our lives, not only in terms of making us feel better by giving us a laugh or making us cry or whatever, but also in terms of economic development and progress. Excuse me. So, if we think about, as I say, we've had this tumultuous period in our history and we're still going through it. And I think one of the things that arts and culture can do is to help us to explore what it all means, to have kind of discussions in hopefully a kind of positive atmosphere, to listen, to read, to watch, to debate, to learn how we can critically analyse what is put before us, and so on. And to me, these are a lot of the things that I hold dear. And as a child, as I said, you know, having that insight into these different worlds, the world of the imagination, as was conjured up by books, was very, very important. And so to me today, looking at the situation, particularly of young people, and within that grouping, particularly of young people and children who find themselves in the care system, it's really important because to me, if we can serve that particular constituency well, excuse me, we'll be serving everybody much better too. So I always have that constituency front and centre of my mind when I talk about these things. And one particular event I remember when I was working in the social work field was taking a group of children from the home where I was working to see the exhibition on Tutankhamun at the British Museum, and those children stood for hours queuing, waiting to go in, and the sense of amazement and wonder about that has stayed with me for a long time. But more recently, there are a much wider set of opportunities and challenges, particularly again for young people now more than ever. We know the issues. We know the issues about crime, about drug abuse, about mental health distress, and so on and so forth. And but we also know, particularly those of us who worked in the sector and seen the evidence of this, we also know the impact that telling a child, you've done really well, this is a great piece of work, you've created something here that's unique. We know that the impact that can have on their sense of self-esteem and the way in which they feel that they are actually being valued as opposed to being treated like criminals the whole time. So we have an abundance of creative talent that we're not yet realising. And I think, again, that one of the contributions that culture and arts can make is to helping not only young people, I would want to stress that, not only young people, but particularly young people, to realise their ambitions in this sector. And in many respects, it's easier to do that now than it's ever been because we have mobile phones on which you can make a movie, make your music, etc., etc. And of course, young people are particularly adept at doing that. So the big question then for today is how can councils and local authorities facilitate this realisation, not only of young people's ambitions, but more widely support and encourage our communities. and also, importantly, to doing that in the context of all the reductions to income for local authorities and with the need to increase spending on areas like social care for the elderly. So this is where the Commission on Culture and Local Government comes in. As we're moving into this phase of trying to work out how to live with COVID, we have a whole new set of challenges to contend with. And you'll be aware, I'm sure, how COVID and the pandemic and lockdown, etc., exposed and in some cases exacerbated the inequalities within our society. So it's been demonstrated, so yes, as I was saying earlier, I want to convince those who see arts and culture as kind of slightly frivolous and the icing on the cake, something to be discarded when times get tough. I want people to see it as much more central to how we work through this recovery. And there are different ways in which this can be done. It's been demonstrated both in the UK and elsewhere that cultural services bring people together at times of crises. And we did see this even during the pandemic, the ability of some arts organisations to be very smart, very fleet-footed, and switch from that personal interaction to sending out materials by post, for example, as one organisation I know in the East End of London did, having worked with a group of autistic young people making films. Suddenly there's lockdown, and those of you who know some of the issues around autism will be aware that having something cut off all of a sudden and changing the routine can be very disturbing. So how do you maintain that connection? A lot of arts and cultural organisations did manage to do that under these really, really difficult circumstances. We're facing this issue around social care, whether that is for children, young people, adults or elders, and it's very, very pressing. At a practical level, culture has a substantial range of benefits, which actually, if you took them away, would make the cost of this social care even more expensive than it is. And I think, again, I'm hoping that you'll be sufficiently, your interest will be sufficiently piqued so that when we publish our report in December this year, you'll see some examples of that and how to go about ensuring that we actually get the most out of our cultural services. It helps, of course, that these activities produce positive things for young people and others to do, both individually and in groups. And that drives educational attainment and aspiration, as well as offering pathways to skills and employment. I'm going to, seeing how swiftly the time is moving on, I'm going to sort of cut as I go along here, because I got so much that I wanted to say, but unfortunately, looks like I'm not going to be able to say a lot of the stuff, and I'll leave out some of the details which I know you already know, although I always like to say this because so many people have a very different idea, is this fact that local authorities are the biggest public funders of culture in this country, spending over £1 billion a year in England alone. That's not for nothing. That's not just to have a bit of fun. That's really, really important work that goes on across the spectrum, whether that's mental health, or whether it's physical health, whether it's social isolation, whether it's educational achievement, etc. And this is facilitated through the museums, the theatres, the castles, the amusement parks, and so on. And it's fortunate, I think, that at the moment, government has recognised this, particularly in relation to the levelling up agenda, where, excuse me, where culture is one of the 3 pillars on which that agenda is resting. And I think it's really important to be able to think about the ways in which we can ensure that cultural and creative industries themselves become more diverse, more representative of the societies in which they're located. So we have an economic contribution, which is absolutely self-evident. We know the figures around the numbers of people who are employed in the industries, the number of jobs that it provides, many of which have transferable skills so that it can move on. And before the pandemic, the creative sector was growing at a rate at 4 times the rest of the economy. And you know, if you look around the country, there are some really strong, interesting examples of how culture has been used to change the way that people both within that particular location and out with that location think about the areas. So, for example, Liverpool would be a prime example, Coventry would be another, Hull would be another, facilitated through the Capital of Culture programmes. And now in London we have a Borough of Culture, and Waltham Forest has been an area that has benefited and continues to benefit from this change in way of thinking about the locality. So I guess as I come to the end, I'd want to say that there are these a whole range of areas in which culture can make an intervention. And I haven't even mentioned placemaking, which has become a real big thing. And I think that's for very obvious reasons. People have gotten fed up with this idea that every town centre you go to looks almost exactly the same. You've got the same shops, etc., etc. Now people want to get that sense of their individuality, the singularity of their location recognised, and to develop that sense of belonging and identity that brings along with it. So we're trying to raise the profile of all of these debates to stimulate a national conversation. We've got on our commission, we've got a fantastic group of commissioners representing a whole range of areas and diverse occupations, etc., different parts of the sector, working with local government. And our aim is to ensure that more people know about the fantastic work that is going on, to draw more councils into taking on some of that work and looking to see where we can really add terrific value across the board with arts and culture. So I'm going to leave you with that point today. And just as a final point to say, you saw the film at the beginning, and it was really great to have those people in person talk to us about the developments there. And that's what we've been doing. We've been taking evidence from people around the country, and we're really eager to share this with you. We'll be making recommendations and sharing the evidence with you in our report in December. And the very final point to say is that we're looking for case studies. So if any of you have any ideas about case studies that we could look at that demonstrate similar points, we'd be very grateful indeed. So thank you very much for listening and coming here this morning. Thank you.